Hi there, I'm Trish Thompson, and I'm a mom of a daughter with absence seizures, and I'm also a school psychologist and a behavior consultant. And when I've been reading through posts lately, there's been a lot of times where I've wanted to leave the same comment around behavior, and because I hope it to be helpful. And then I realized it might be easier just to make a video and post it so that everyone can kind of see it. I have a background of 20 years working as a behavior consultant in the schools and as a school psychologist. And so what I did professionally before my daughter was diagnosed with absence seizures was I helped kids with disabilities, educational disabilities, by assessing those disabilities, determining if they qualify for special education, and helping create IEPs. My specialty was really in the area of behavior management because many kids have behavioral difficulties, but when you are not neurotypical and you're dealing with a medical issue that involves your brain, and then you're in a school environment all day, which really is asking you to face your own neurological weakness over and over and over and over again, it can really create some difficult behaviors. And then as a mom, once it was happening in my own household, I had a whole other experience of, your child coming home from school just so exhausted from what it takes to keep up and to perform and to behave in a neurotypical setting, that it breaks your heart. And my daughter Lauren was diagnosed at the end of second grade, really out of nowhere to us. She'd been, a quote-unquote typical child, and within 3 months she was having hundreds, if not thousands, of absence seizures a day. She became learning disabled. She was unable to do some of her activities like piano because of the effect of the medication on her visual motor skills. She was having dystonia, where her hands would freeze and she wouldn't be able to move them. She was having vertigo. She was having what we think were some partial seizures, of kind of losing control of her body but not being unconscious. She was falling down in the morning. Just really scary stuff that I know so many of you have experienced just that and worse. And then I had a child that went from being typical to, needing to sleep 13 or 14 hours a day and still being what we used to say off her rocker sometimes. Just a powder keg waiting to explode. And it was all so confusing. And my background in this field helped somewhat. But as a parent, it's never easy to see your own child going through something like that. And the thing I always tell parents now, having had my own experience, is there is no silver bullet. There is no formula. There's no right way to do this. You are going to mess up. Your child is going to mess up. It's going to be messy sometimes. You're going to triumph sometimes and have overcome things together. And there's going to be times where you lose your temper and you feel like a horrible parent, and it's all of it. So give yourself some grace as you go through this, because it's really, truly not easy for anybody, and there is no one answer. What I hope to provide you with today is just a little tool that I find helpful when looking at behavior, because for our kids with absence seizures, behavior can often be an issue, either at home or at school or both. And this model helps us kind of figure out, why is that? Like, why are they going to school all day and behaving and then coming home and absolutely letting loose on us at home? Or sometimes it's the opposite, where they are just wild at home and you're tearing your hair out, and they may even be violent, and then they go to school and they're calm, cool, and collected. Or at home, they're calm, cool, and collected, but the anxiety about going to school, and when they are at school, they have tantrums, they throw things, they cry, they have all these behavioral things come up. And the reason for that is that we all are born with and have within ourselves a system for regulating and managing our own emotions and our behavior. And I call it the bathtub model of self-regulation. That's kind of like the visual. If you think of our kids especially, but you could apply yourself to it too, we all have stressors that are coming in. And by stressors, I don't necessarily mean negative things. Like it doesn't have to be like too much homework, and it doesn't have to be negative. It's just, what are the things that our brain and our emotions are having to process and deal with? And for most of our kids, it's a heck of a lot. Possibly more than even a neurotypical kid's brain would be designed to handle in this information age at school. So much information coming at them all the time. So many things to do, so many things to consider, so many ideas floating around, so much verbal input. This can be kind of like a fire hose for elementary school students. Then they've got the drain, and the drain is how we cope and process through all the stuff that comes into the system, right? Well, in a neurotypical child, often this system works pretty well. There's stressors coming in, there's a way for dealing with it and processing it, and so their water level stays pretty manageable. And if it doesn't, like let's say something goes awry here that's different and is more than they can manage, the water rises up, but then people come in and fix this, they get the drain going, and it regulates itself. So it doesn't stay up there for very long. However, in our children with seizure disorders, they may be operating like this all the time. Their water level may be high all the time. And what that looks like is, let's say this water level's high, and then you add something to the bathtub. What happens? Splashes, spillover, right? You may not have known how high the water level was until you made a simple request and it got a huge explosion from it. Examples of kids at school might be that on a day where they were well rested and their meds were working pretty well and their nutrition was good and they felt like they were in a pretty good mood, they did this great writing assignment and really were able to be quite successful at it. And then a week later, when seizures interrupted their sleep, when they changed meds, when they didn't get enough to eat with their nighttime med, with the many factors that can be at play here, that water level was high and the teacher didn't know it, because on the outside they may look exactly the same on a day when the water level's high and on a day when the water level is manageable. And the teacher asks them to write their name on their paper. Huge explosion. The water spills over everywhere and we have a behavior problem. To the teacher, it's quite confusing because they think, well, I know they can write. They did a beautiful job last week. This must be manipulative. They must be working me. They just don't feel like doing it. And what really, if we can help teachers understand, is that it's not about that. It's that this water level was really, really high and we didn't know it. And we made a request at a time when they didn't have the capacity to manage the request. Any request that comes in here is going to get met with water splashes. And how do we do that at home? The same exact way, because we can have our child appear to be well regulated on the outside, when really there's things at play with their brain. Even if they're not having seizures, the electrical activity in their brain is often very different in response to their environment than the neurotypical child. Their sleep patterns may be off, they may be tired. There's so many things that can happen. They may feel socially out of place, have some low self-esteem, maybe they're falling behind academically, so many factors. And they come home from school, and where's their water level? My daughter, when she came home from school, managed to not have many behavior problems at school, and guess what happened at home? We had a lot of splashing. We had a ton of splashing because that little girl, by the time she went through that whole day of not understanding, of missing information, of not having slept enough, water level's up here, and she's managing it all day long. And then she gets home and we ask her to do something that she's not capable of managing at that point. And she empties the water. Maybe her brain isn't going to allow her to process and manage the information in a typical way, so it comes out a different way. And maybe it coming out that way doesn't even lower the water level. And that's why so many families are so exhausted, you guys, is even after the big tantrum meltdown, there's not a lot of calm. And really and truly, the reason this model works so well and why I like to use it is it works for every child. Because we're all different. We're all managing different levels of input coming in. We're all managing different systems for coping. In seizure disorders, the differences in our kids are as vast and diverse as anything, right? No two kids with seizure disorders are experiencing it the same way. But we can look at this model to kind of figure out, okay, well, is there anything that we can slow down in their environment? Is there any way to get this water coming in a little bit more slowly? Maybe it's not going somewhere right after school. Maybe it's not requiring all the things I required before the seizure disorder started until we kind of figure out where this water level is. Maybe it's temporarily the teacher saying, hey, you know what? I know you're working on a lot of stuff right now. You're working on just how to get a full night's sleep and take your medication and get through the school day. How about for now we don't worry about how long your writing page is? Let's get us kind of even keeled here, and then we'll add that in again later when we feel like it's manageable. Ross Green is a great resource for working with schools, the explosive child, because it's not about children with seizure disorders, but it's about this. It's about children's capacity and that kids do well when they can. And so it's a great problem solver of, are there some things that we can take off the plate here that will lower the amount of stressors coming in that they have to deal with and process? And then looking at this, what are their systems that they have for managing? Maybe in the classroom, they just can't manage. The water level's too high. They got to get somewhere quiet. They got to do something that's regulating and relaxing. Repetitive pattern movement tends to be a good thing for that. Origami, bubble blowing, riding a tricycle, just doing something, and it's different for all kids, so I can't really give a good example. For my daughter, it was listening to music. So she comes home from school, she's got her Alexa in her room, she goes in there, puts on some songs, and we just know we're not going to be bugging her and asking her to do stuff right away after school. We're putting that in place. And once you can kind of figure out, well, what happens with these water levels? Young kids can't really articulate where their water level is very well, but we can use this to kind of have a conversation about it, about where they are, noticing that when water level's high,